Hey, Clemson family, ACC realignment is dead, except maybe when it's not. I don't know. There's some interesting stuff floating around out there tonight. As we record this, we'll get into it.
I'm Daniel Shirley. It never seems to end, does it? But it felt like it was over, and now it's back on our docket.
Yep. And we'll also preview defensive backs for 2023 with the Tigers, as well as a couple of opponents. This is the Reign Supreme Alway podcast, season two. You get our faces now. I don't know if that's better or worse, but here we are. You can catch our website, clemsonkickoff.com. We've got the schedule there. We've got our archive of past episodes. You can catch up on other 2023 previews. Just scroll on through. You can catch up on other opponent previews as well. But let's start with this ACC stuff. There have been a lot of reports floating around out there today. Wednesday, the 23rd, as we record this, Yahoo's Ross Dellinger put a lot of detail on Twitter. ESPN's Pete Thamel had a lot of info. And Daniel, your colleague at The Athletic, Nicole Auerbach, also had quite a bit. Basically, Stanford, Cal, and SMU are apparently back on the table. They ACC was one vote shy of being able to add them earlier this summer. They may have gotten that other vote in line and might be ready to proceed from the straw poll to an actual formal vote.
Yeah, it feels like it could be coming this week, is what Nicole wrote, and Stuart Mandel wrote a column for us at the Athletic. That why is this happening? It's because of money. I mean, the carrot is money. It's all about money. And Stuart wrote that this makes no sense, and it makes all the sense in the world. So, if you think of it as, does this make any sense geographically? Well, no, it doesn't. And um, as Stuart pointed out, the 10 of the 12 current Pac-12 teams will be stretched across the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC if this happens. And none of those schools or none of those conferences have had a school in the Pacific time zone before all this happened. So, but there's money, and money makes everything make sense. And that's what this sounds like this is all about.
Absolutely. Do you think that it's about the ACC kind of safeguarding itself, future-proofing itself? Were Clemson, were Florida State, were other schools to leave and go to one of the current Big Two right now, moving up from the Power Five, which is now like a Power 4.21 or something like that?
Yeah, it feels like it's a kind of a backfill, right? Just in case. And I still don't think Clemson and Florida State are leaving anytime soon. I
Right.
just don't get that sense. I don't, for all the talk about the grant of rights and we can get it out and we can do this, and it's not a deterrent. It is a deterrent, and everybody who I've read who has seen what is these schools are up against says they can't get out of this anytime soon. So it doesn't feel like that's going to happen anytime soon, but it does feel like that's part of why this is happening, just in case, a Florida State leaves or a Clemson leaves or UNC or Virginia, whoever it is, we've got some schools in place that can help us and kind of keep that Power Five moniker going for the ACC.
Yeah, and like you said, the it only makes sense for the money. And Stanford and Cal reportedly willing to join the ACC for an unequal share. SMU, I find this hard to fathom, but apparently they're willing to go several years with no media money coming into the school, that all three schools would be chipping in a little bit extra or maybe a considerable amount extra to sweeten the pot for the existing members. And that's where it would make sense. I wonder how that would work for Notre Dame getting extra football media revenue, at least, as not really a full football member. I'm not sure why they are so committed to this as much as some of the other schools. I can see why Wake Forest, Syracuse, Louisville, some of the Boston College, some of
Georgia
those
Tech.
other.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where else are they going to get some of this? And of course, the schools like Florida State and Clemson who have lobbied for unequal revenue sharing out of playoff payouts, out of, other postseason payouts to go to the teams that made it, obviously are going to be looking and saying, well, hey, look at our performance once again. Look at our ratings once again. Maybe bring that into the picture this time. Don't just take the unequal part from those three schools and divvy it up, 15 ways, divvy it up a lot differently and make it make more sense to the schools that are looking to get out. Of course, they're trying to narrow that gap with what the SEC has signed on to make, what the Big Ten, who I don't believe has formally signed its deal with their network partners yet on the new TV deal, but it seems to be coming together and maybe was only held up to add these West Coast teams once that became apparent that that was a stronger option than anyone had realized beyond USC and UCLA with the other teams that they have added from out West. But you and I texted a lot last week about, and you just kept saying, well, it doesn't make sense. And it was late and I was still working. You were done for the night, but I knew it was kind of late for you. I didn't really press you on it. If you meant geographically, if you meant competitively, if you just meant from a fan point of view, but kind of what to you, if you're, I'm not saying put yourself in Gray and Meff's shoes and look at it as a business deal, but just as a follower of the sport, what about it makes the least sense to you?
Well, geographically, it makes the least sense. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Money wise, I don't know what Stanford, Cal, SMU. I think SMU brings more than Stanford and Cal.
Sure.
The big money boosters, the interest in the program. I think there's more than in football. Just talking about football here, right?
Sure.
We're not talking.
Well, that's what's driving this,
right? We're not talking about women's basketball. We're not talking about baseball. We're not talking about softball. Talking about football. I think there is big money interest in SMU. That's how they can kind of pay to play here, because that's what they're going to be doing. But it just, the only way I can see that this makes sense is what you said before. It's kind of a backfill in case Florida State, Clemson, whoever decide to leave, or if Notre Dame somehow was convinced, okay, they did this, we wanted them to do this, now we'll get into bed with the ACC for football. That's not happening. I don't think there's any way in the world that's going to happen. But
no, the money's too different.
Right. That would make it make sense. Unless the ACC just went to Notre Dame and said, keep your NBC money. Keep it. Do what you want to with it, and then we'll split up the rest of it. But I don't think the ACC is going to do that. So, there's just a lot of it that doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of it that does make sense. And the part of it that seems to make sense this go around with realignment, and this hasn't been the truth before, I don't think, is as many teams as you can get, right? What did the Big 12 do? They went out and added a bunch of teams. Did they add a bunch of marquee teams? No. Arizona State. I mean, Utah's the best team they got. That's great. I love Utah. Utah's a great program. Utah's not an elite program. They didn't add an elite program. Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, UCF. Those are great programs. They're not elite, but they got a bunch. So it feels like the Big 12 is safe right now. The Big 10, for all of its talk, we don't want Oregon. We don't want Washington. What'd they do? They realized we need more teams. They went and got them. So if you're the other, quote, Power 5 conference now, well, what do? Do you stay at 14 while these others are now 16 and 18? And the SEC's got Texas and Oklahoma coming in? No, then you've got to go get some more teams. I could see that being kind of the saving grace this time, at least to get us to the next time, because we know another one's coming. This isn't over.
Right.
It might be over for 5 or 6 years, but it's not over. We're going to get to 2 big conferences, and football's going to break off, and all that stuff's going to happen. It's just not going to happen right now. But it does feel like the ACC needs more bodies, and they can get a pro rata rate with ESPN, with new teams. And, if let's say you get SMU, what about UConn? I don't know who else. West Virginia. I don't know. I know. And you're rolling your eyes. I'm rolling my eyes as I say it. Right. but more teams seems to be the key right now.
Yeah.
Unless you're the SEC, and you don't need more teams.
Right. Well, and again, I know that cable deals, and you and I have been through this in previous episodes. I won't go too far down this road, but adding Cal and Stanford and SMU right now does add two very populous states to the ACC. While cable revenue does make a difference, I'm not saying that's the future of all this, but right now it does still make a difference to add those markets, add those states,
Absolutely.
get on those systems and collect those payouts. And maybe that gets the ACC in better graces with ESPN. Maybe it positions the ACC to be able to make future moves that really aren't being discussed right now, but can materialize out of thin air. I've mentioned before, former Clemson president James Barker used to talk about, hey, ACC should look to move out to the Pacific Coast. And it really didn't seem like much of a thought, certainly not before Oklahoma and Texas made their moves. Suddenly, UCLA and USC make a move to the Big Ten, and now it's like, well, maybe the money does work. That even though you're going to have all this extra travel, maybe West Virginia served as that model to show that its deal in the Big 12 makes the travel pay a worthwhile investment. The travel cost.
You just wish. You just wish. A couple of points there.
Mm-hmm.
The linear stuff still matters. It still matters. We're not seeing. Look, if streaming played a big enough deal, the Pac-12 wouldn't have imploded because they couldn't find anybody to give them any money, including streaming. And we
not
are
on the scale that linear could.
Not that they need. And we are seeing that all these streaming services, they don't want to pay up these big money amounts. What are the streaming services buying up? MLS and leagues like that, where there's not this big explosion of money. They're not getting the college football is not streaming's not jumping into college football because there's not enough money. And then two, your point, I think is a great point. The ACC network will now be in the Bay Area. And the ACC network will now be, if this happens, if it happens. And that's a big if right now here on Tuesday night. I think it's
very
Tuesday.
much so.
It feels like it's Tuesday. It'll be in Dallas, Texas, whatever you want it, the state of Texas. That's huge.
Yeah.
Because then you can charge those rates in those states and get all those extra viewers in those states. That's a big part of this for sure.
Yep. We'll see how it all goes. A lot of unknowns still out there. Be sure to follow us on Twitter as things unfold at Clemson Kickoff. We're also on Threads, not totally active there, but we're there. We're on Instagram as well. We're on Facebook. Catch us on your favorite social media site. You'll be able to at least keep up with our episodes. And we do tend to make sure that news gets relayed to you on Twitter as well. Let's get into defensive backs on the Clemson Tigers for 2023. Let's talk about what's going to happen on that grass there in Death Valley, that beautiful stadium, that beautiful field that's well kept up by our fine agricultural institution, Clemson University. And I think the safeties, you got three guys coming back right there. They're going to be the backbone of this backfield. They are also going to really drive the decision by defensive coordinator or co-coordinator Wes Goodwin and Mickey Kahn as the other co-coordinator to involve the three safety package more often, run a 4-2-5 more often than just a traditional 4-3 with four defensive backs. You're also, I think, going to have more experience at corner. We saw Nate Wiggins grow up and emerge and become a better player, especially in the second half last year. The long touchdown return in the ACC championship game notwithstanding, he was very solid quite a bit of the season. We didn't see him get picked on nearly as much by Tennessee in the Orange Bowl as the rest of the backfield did. We're going to see Sheridan Jones coming back, likely starting again, a more physical corner, a little more versatile in that way. This is a really good starting five if you're going to have five guys starting back there.
It is. And I think that experience is huge, right? We saw that with Wiggins last year. He didn't play a lot as a freshman, really struggled early. as a sophomore, including that Wake Forest game where he was really torched the whole game. But then he made the big play at the end, right, to kind of save the game. But then, Jaden Lucas got a lot of experience. Sherrod Coville got a lot of experience. Jalen Phillips has experience. And then Makuba, Mickens, those guys are experienced. Sheridan Jones is experienced. Toriano Pride played a lot last year. And then hopefully we'll see some Miles Oliver this year. And then I think one name to keep an eye on is Avion Terrell. A lot of positive feedback from what we're hearing about him in practice so far. And, comparing him to his brother, if he turns out to be what his brother was, or even better, that he's going to be a remarkable player. He'll go down as one of Clemson's best ever cornerbacks, if that's the case. But a lot more experience, a lot more just solid play with this group this year. Last year they're moving Makuba around. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? Well, he has to play corner some this week because guys are banged up and guys aren't where they need to be. Well, Sheridan Jones is back and those guys are back. So, with Sheridan Jones and Wiggins as kind of the starting cornerbacks, Lucas and Pride are back. Now Pride is there. Terrell is there and Oliver is there. You've got enough talent and experience at cornerback that Makuba can just go play safety. Just go play safety. Be a safety. And that's what he is. They had him all over the place last year. He wasn't healthy. I think we all know that. I'm really excited about this secondary group this year and seeing what they can be on the back end of that defense. Because, Bill, I feel like not that they let the team down last year, but the secondary really was inconsistent last year. And it hurt this defense at times, especially in those three losses: the South Carolina game, the Tennessee game, and the Notre Dame game.
Yep. They were my biggest concern last year. They are not this year. They were actually close to my biggest concern on the whole team, neck and neck with the offensive line, slight edge to the offensive line. I think that was better addressed than the defensive backs were, quite frankly. I'm more concerned this season with the defensive ends and the containment that they're going to be able. They'll pressure quarterbacks just fine. I'm worried about containment. I'm worried about setting the edge. Sheridan Jones could be part of the solution there. Bringing Makuba up into that nickel spot as a starting safety, I think, could be a part of the solution there. Jalen Phillips, R.J. Mickens. Mickens sure looks good when they put him up in the box and does a nice job against the run. He's got the
I didn't even mention
bloodlines.
RJ, right? I didn't even mention him.
Father is a longtime NFL veteran. He's been around the game a long time. And then the other guy, maybe in similar shoes, is Avion Terrell, considerably younger brother of AJ Terrell. Very familiar face to Clemson fans and particularly to secondary coach Mike Reed. Terrell was not an early enrollee this year, and yet he has turned heads quickly since getting on campus. That doesn't surprise me. Hard to predict that. And then two guys who were here for spring ball that, if you mentioned them, I missed them. Apologies. Is Khalil Barnes at safety, right, and then Shelton Lewis at corner. Both were working out leading up to the bowl game. Obviously, they weren't part of the team yet. They weren't going to play, but they were on campus and working out and even turning heads back then. And now you're looking at those guys also being depth. There are guys for days. Someone's got to emerge, though. Let's put a little bit of critique on this. Someone has to emerge at being better, at being more consistent. If Wiggins can become a true lockdown for one side of the field, that will change things considerably. But he's not the most physical guy, and so teams sometimes can kind of scheme a little bit, put a bigger guy on him, run at that side of the field more, make a guy like that uncomfortable, and make him a little less of a shutdown corner than his actual coverage ability would otherwise dictate. So they do have to work on being more complete, more thorough, more consistent, fewer mistakes, and if they do, this whole defense can just really be one of the great ones in the past 40 years.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, that obviously the Tyler Venables injury hurts. Not having him, again, another veteran presence in that group, but there's so much depth. There's so much versatility, that let's say Sheridan Jones, he's a good player, really good player. Is he an NFL player? I don't know, but he's a really good college player. Jaden Lucas, if Jaden Lucas is healthy, he wasn't healthy last year. I mean, the shoulder, everything that he went through. So there's little pieces of the puzzle that they all fit into. And that's what I like about it. Yeah, Nate Wiggins isn't the most physical guy in the world. Sheridan Jones is, right? I mean, RJ Mickens is. Those guys can be physical. So I like what I see from this group. Can't wait to see them. And they're going to be tested early. Duke, talented quarterback at Duke, talented quarterback at Florida State, talented quarterback at Notre Dame. I know that's later in the season, but they're going to be tested. And I can't wait to see how they match up.
Yep. The other thing, maybe it's too soon to get into this, but it's timely because it's something that head coach Dabo Swinney said this week. He put the seniors, quote, on the clock. He said every class that has been recruited to Clemson since 2013, correct me if I'm wrong, has won a national championship. I know you got red shirts and you got guys who leave early, but in general, those classes, every one of them has won a national championship. And now for the class of 2019, this is their last shot. Again, COVID year, blah, blah, blah. Effectively, this is their last shot. You get the point of what he's making. He's willing to ratchet up the expectation. And I think there are two reasons for that. One, he sees the talent in the room that can achieve that. And two, I think we've talked in the past about last year, there was some get up and let up. I think he wants to make sure that it's clear being really good isn't being championship level. Being really good doesn't meet best as the standard, as you've discussed. And I think he wants to ratchet up that expectation, hopefully without the pressure, because you do also hear a lot of compliments to guys in the locker room, from the veterans to the true freshmen. Lofty expectations, though, and I think this secondary and this entire defense front to back is a big reason why.
I do too, and I think he sees the leadership, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to say those kinds of things if you don't think you have the leadership in the room. And we've heard Dabo talk about in the offseason, all the leadership metrics that they use have been off the charts this offseason. So that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah. A little bit goosebumps, not gonna lie. Let me reset a little bit. Check out our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. As I mentioned before, we've got all our episodes there. You can check through when we talked about the defensive line and the linebackers as well. Certainly linebackers and DBs, especially the safeties, are going to intermingle quite a bit, but working between a 4-3, a 3-4, or maybe a 4-2-5 being the base, possibly the new base. It sure sounds that way. Let's get into a couple of team previews now, opponent previews, and we'll try to keep these short because now we're getting into the part of the schedule where a lot can change between now and when they play. Quicker reviews of Miami and NC State. Let's start with Miami. Daniel, you were right. I was wrong last year about Miami. Cristobal was not able to just come in, flip a switch, instill discipline, and have a better team. The offensive coordinator hire was not good, at least not a good fit with who they had, especially shining young quarterback in Tyler Van Dyke. Gaddis is out. That does mean that it is Van Dyke's third offensive coordinator in as many years. They've got to figure it out quick, and that defense needs to possibly lead the way, especially from the front seven.
Yeah, I get some right every once in a while, and I was right about Miami. So I'll pat myself on the back about Miami. I got them. They've redone the coaching staff. They've totally reinvented who they are as a coaching staff. That's going to be really interesting to see if that works out. That usually takes time. You don't just turn your coaching staff over from one year to the next and it just clicks. So we'll see. I do feel like they have to be a defensive focused team if they're going to be anything this year. I don't think they're on the level with Clemson and Miami. Clemson and Florida State. I don't think they're on the level. They're kind of the opposite of North Carolina. North Carolina doesn't play any defense and plays all offense. Miami can't really play a whole lot of offense and has to play a lot of defense. I do feel like maybe they're the third and fourth best teams, but there's a huge gap between Clemson, Florida State, and then what's next in the conference. And I think that's Miami and North Carolina. But they've got some big time answers. Bill, they got pushed around up front on both sides of the ball. And that's how you end up with the kind of season you have that they had last year. You can have all the pieces to the puzzle. You can have the quarterback, you can have the running backs, you can have the receivers, you can have the DBs, you can have all that. But if you get pushed around up front, you are not going to win games in college football.
Yep. New defensive coordinator for the Hurricanes this year as well. So still a search for Cristobal to figure out really the magical formula there. Let's get into some slightly more familiar territory with the NC State Wolfpack. Dave Doran has been entrenched there for a long time. He's probably passed up some pretty good offers, or at least used some serious interest to get a little money out of his current job, get a little better raise, what have you. But even Doran, with all his stability, has replaced his offensive coordinator coming into this season. He did have to replace his quarterback. I think before last season, everybody figured it was Devin Leary's last year in college football. Turned out it was only his last year at NC State, and now they bring in Brennan Armstrong from Virginia, who did not fare all that well under Tony Elliott last season. They also, in a pretty savvy move, I think, by Dave Doran, bring in Robert Anae from Syracuse, spent 1 year there. The year before that, he had paired very well with Brennan Armstrong at Virginia. So it's going to be interesting. They're going to have several weeks under their belt by the time they face Clemson. And look, last year, Clemson beat NC State decisively on both sides of the ball. That was with Leary before the season-ending injury. Now, at least it would seem to me that the Wolfpack can contend on offense, and it'll come down to maybe whose offense is finer tuned and able to exploit defensive weaknesses more consistently throughout the night.
Yeah, I like Armstrong a lot. I was surprised that marriage with he and Tony Elliott didn't work out in Virginia. But he makes sense for NC State. He absolutely does. They need a plug and play guy. They need a veteran guy. They've got pieces. They've got the line. They've got everything really that you need offensively to work. They couldn't go out and start over at quarterback with a young guy or somebody with not a lot of experience. And he makes a lot of sense for them. I like the offense coordinator hire too. I really do. And look, Doran gets beat up a lot. We beat up on him. People make fun of him. He's done a heck of a job in NC State. You do. Come on, don't lie. He's done a heck of a job in NC State. Remember what NC State was before he took over? I mean, up and down and instability, and you can't rely on them. At least you know what they are. Now, have they gotten to the next level? No. But you know what they are right now, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Now, can they get to that next level? We'll see. That I mentioned Miami and UNC. NC State's probably in that same group with them as well. I like what they have coming back this year. They're going to be a really intriguing team in the ACC.
Yeah, I feel like, people talk about the ceiling and the floor. I feel like, NC State's going to be considerably above 500 in conference play. You don't feel like they're going to run the table, though, even with this injection. Now, look, it wouldn't, knock me on my back if they were to emerge as the ACC champion. It's certainly not something I'm going to predict, though. Look, at least Dave Doran was smart enough that when Devin Leary left, it wasn't because he told him to, right? Unlike Russell Wilson back in the day, where, hey, we got this Glennon guy. He's going to be way better. Ooh, yeah. That one didn't work out.
They still haven't recovered from that, right?
No. But and they do have probably the three guys that I saw play last year after Leary got hurt, all talented. A couple of them also got hurt. Some of them were a little inconsistent, or the tape got out and they got figured out. Well, they were young, they were inexperienced. That's not unusual. You get an off season under your belt and you come back better and smarter and stronger, and you perform well. So it's not like, I wouldn't say it's Armstrong or bust. I do think it was very plug and play to go get him, go get an offensive coordinator familiar
Yes.
with, terminologies familiar with, play calling that he's familiar with. They can come in and do this. Oh, by the way, one other transfer we're kind of familiar with, Dakari Collins at wide receiver, who I really think has a lot of talent. He's a young guy. Maybe he's going to get, again, push that reset button, find a way to be a better contributor, be more consistent, be more complete ball player, perhaps. Look, NC State rarely has no talent. You almost never look at this team and go, well, that's a guaranteed win for Clemson, right? So it'll be an interesting one, I think, when we get to this point in the year. And it's going to come amid a pretty thick schedule of teams that are either really good at giving Clemson a fight, like Syracuse, maybe Wake Forest, somewhere in between that description and this one, which is a lot of blue chip talent around the roster from top to bottom, like Florida State, like Miami, even though they're underachieving. They've got talent, they've got recruits. NC State has recruits, Notre Dame has recruits. Like, this is going to be a rough stretch, and it's really going to prove what the Tigers are or maybe aren't. As we mentioned earlier, Dabo Swinney is pretty confident in what they are.
It sounds like it. And this is going to be an interesting schedule. This isn't a walkthrough schedule. I don't, Notre Dame at home, Notre Dame, they won 28, 29 straight games against ACC schools. That includes Clemson a couple of times. So, they haven't lost to an ACC team in a while. Florida State's a good team. I think Miami, like you said, talent. NC State, talent. Duke, talented quarterback, talented coaching staff. So this is going to be North Carolina, talent. So there's a lot of talent in the conference this year, and Clemson's going to have to be ready to play week to week if it wants to be the kind of team that it sounds like they think they are.
Yeah. You mentioned Notre Dame. We will get into them in our next episode. We will talk about the wide receiver group at Clemson, talk about another group that needs to take a step forward, be more consistent. We'll talk about that more in detail. If any more realignment news comes up, we will pop it up as needed in between episodes. Check us out on ClemsonKickoff.com. Check us out at Clemson Kickoff on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads. We're on Facebook as well. Search for us there. And until our next episode, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.